As I continue on with these drawings done with the felt tip India ink, and I getting more lines and more different sizes of the paper, I find myself more and more involved in how lines connect and make patterns, and how lines that connect make patterns, and reflecting upon in this information that we have now, that this powerful information that is telling us something, but I'm not sure what they're telling us. So for me, I always got to go back to pattern, and have a dog that barks a lot. I think that it's really the going. I've been looking at South Seas, a lot of the South Seas, the Maori tribes in New Zealand, and different tribes in the southern Pacific Islands, and looking at the patterns. And what are the patterns describing? Are they describing the flow of blood? And is it a map of their life? I look at it as something that is today for me is becoming very different. As I keep going more and more into these patterns with the outside shape, again, as we talked about before, the outside shape is holding the inside lines. What I mean by that is the lines are not deciding the outside shape, but the lines are deciding the inside patterns and the variety of inside patterns that force me to look at things like perhaps the wiring in an information system. If we could look at the lines as wires of visual information. So when I'm thinking of the South Pacific Islanders, I'm thinking I want to know what they're talking about in their patterns, but I also want to know, do they feel that strong identity that they have with the patterns going to lead them to a higher spirituality? I don't claim my drawings to be spiritual as a statement. I feel that they are spiritual in the way they end up. And when they don't feel that way, then they're not as successful. But like I have said many times before, each one is different because like people, each one of us is different. Now, I'm going to draw with the number 2 pencil again, that because it doesn't show up. And I let myself kind of freeform things. I'm always starting off with some form of the mask. Again, the mask, always part of my work right now and most of my life. The mask, the head. So I have an outline here of what the outside form may be, and I may change it slightly. But as I'm starting off with my large big brush pit Faber-Castell Indie ink felt tip. I want the line to travel and make connections, because in the end the line is an important part of the information of the drawing. I don't want two lines to be exactly the same next to each other, but I also want them to relate to each other. With the large pen and with the Indie ink, the Indie ink doesn't go through the water. This is watercolor paper again, 100% rag watercolor paper. I want the story in the line. So I'm carving with this more than as much as I'm making a line with it. So I'm carving with black into the white of the watercolor paper. It's like if I'm carving a mask, and but the black becomes the negative, and the white becomes the positive. Again, I'm going over those pencil lines that were just a kind of a guide. This brush is the same Indie ink, just like the other ones, except it's making a smaller line. This brush allows me to talk about the line without it being too stiff. In other words, it becomes a little more painterly or brush-like. Now I set up a different tension between the thick black and the thin lines of the same black. I could make that line a little thicker in the lips, the upper part of the lips, and just leave the bottom where the light of the bottom part of the lips. If I find myself pushing to get a lighter dark, bordering on a gray, and letting some smaller white lines come through. So it's not the same black all over. Let's go back to the big felt tip. And once again, I'm carving with this. And the carving is made from the black. and the white becomes the negative, and the black becomes the story in the shape. The variety I can get with this is quite amazing. And the variety of blacks that I can get with the amount of pressure I put on it is important. That and that are from the same felt tip. People have a tendency to use their felt tips like it's always the same all over. Felt tips aren't. The variety is very important. The information that I bring may also come from the Faber-Castell pit. Very fine point. And I want something that plays against that. Giving me a dark gray or a light black. But I want that texture. I'm asking for texture from this little pen. If I could make just lines, as I was doing for a while, I would get this. And I may want that in some places to play against other lines. So that tells me this is the line it makes when it's used by itself. But when it's not used by itself, in terms of making it go up and down, I go backwards and forwards over it, I get that. And that's the result of the same pen used in two different ways. The ink is the information about the shape. The white becomes the shape for the information. When we use a variety of sizes of these very small pens, and they come in a variety of tiny and they make sets of these. If I'm going here, and I take that, again, you could see the difference in the size of the line, of this line and that line. The thickness is different. But now I want to take it and go over here. And go lighter, hit it lightly when I'm doing that, letting it show up in a variety of ways in that shape there, the shape around the eye socket. My old buddy that I've had for many years of studying the head, it gives you the two sides. The head with the skull and the head with the eye and nose and the lips coming out. To understand that is to understand a lot of what I play with the mask. Many masks take on a different shape for an eye, but most of the time what cultures do is they try to match each eye. I'm not interested in matching each eye. I want a difference between them. I want the information from one eye to another telling us that maybe we could see things differently. And how we see things differently may be how we can sculpt out the shapes in our lives. Let's look at another pen. And this one is a 0.1. 0.1 is getting down to 0, pretty good, almost not being there. It barely shows up, but it's nice to have something barely showing up. I could have in the same drawing barely showing up and have that heavy dark on one side. Suppose I wanted to take that barely showing up line and just have it a little bit sticking up. And by doing this, I get the dimension comes, but very slight. A slight dimension is saying that it's not much information, but it's enough information. Now that we've gotten to the point in the information age that we know that we can tap things in and we'll get a lot of information about something, and we'll get more in detail as time goes by and the amount of information comes by. But what I'm doing in these is I'm creating the information. I don't need the information to already exist. I want the information to be being made. And the line becomes a wiring in the system. Let's go back to the big black pit point. And remember, these come to a point. I want the lines to go smoothly and rhythmically. I don't want the lines to be rough and jagged. I want the information to flow smoothly, one piece of information into another. I want to balance a little bit off this, so I'm going to come in here and not balancing in the sense that it's symmetrical, but balancing in the sense of the weight is close enough to hold each other in place. It's the holding of the information in place that allows us to see the whole piece in an unsymmetrical forms in an unsymmetrical world. The world is unsymmetrical. I'd like to think of the Greeks and the classical Greeks world of the balance. And I understand the order in which things grow in nature, the phyllotaxis, the Greek system of measuring the growth of nature. But what they ended up with was the classical feeling. I don't want a classical feeling. I want an emotional feeling of information that's connected through line and shape. I want to go up here and put some dots just for something different up there. But as I do that, I repeat it over here, as I might do if I was painting in color. Those dots become like I would do with the color. I repeat it someplace else so the eye could go to both places. The eye goes here and there. And maybe up in here. Let's go back to the brush pen, and it says B for black on it, just as the big ones say, and they're related to each other. It's the same. It's just a smaller, thinner version of the big brush. What this does, it allows me to carve out and make thin lines with the carving. And it does it in a manner that allows me to look at it and to play with the line. Maybe put a little profile on the side there. This allows me to change my mind as I'm working, responding to the lines and the shapes, to the black and to the whites. Now where that gray is, I can take this pen and make lines into that. Just to get a variety in there, so it's not a flat. So I'm searching now if I need some more, and this may be it. Okay, for now this is it. I've deliberately given it more weight on the right side, less weight on the left side, but the left side is holding the right side in place. I have no idea what the story is, except that it's just telling me what I just did. One of the things that can be most helpful to anyone learning to draw, and I taught life drawing, for example, for 21 years, and I told the students that the line tells the story of the body. You could have all your shapes and your shading and all that sort of thing, but if the line that you started with is not telling the story of the pose, then you're going to miss it. And for these are flowing all the time in my mind, and flowing, and I have to flow with it or I lose it. I don't have a model. I have my hand and eye and mind working together with my ink.